Hare Krishna. Good morning. It's time to read Srimad Bhagavatam. Morning is a good time to read Bhagavatam. We're reading out of the fifth canto, part 1, chapter 1. And we left off, last verse we read was verse 15. So we're going to take up at verse 16. And this is a section about Priyavrata Maharaj. He's one of the sons of Swayambhuva Manu, and he was very devoted. He practiced austerities for many years, fixed his mind on Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, wasn't interested in making any endeavor within the material world, was just using his time to prepare for returning home back to Godhead, had no interest whatsoever in trying to enjoy or become active on the material plane. However, this is a very long time ago, a lot closer to the creation of the entire universe than we are now. And at that time, there was a need to populate the universe because it's an opportunity for living entities to practice going back home, back to Godhead, and to fulfill their material desires. They have those material desires, so it's an opportunity to fulfill them, and at the same time, in such a way that they can become freed from material desires. So it was a need to populate the universe. And so Lord Brahma actually appeared before Priyavrata Maharaj and convinced him. He's actually his grandfather. I mean, this goes way back, the beginning of the creation. Priyavrata was the grandson of Lord Brahma. So he convinced him to take up household life and to create offspring. But he also had the benediction that he would not forget Krishna. He would enjoy the material situation, be fully satisfied in sense gratification, but at the same time, not forget Krishna. This is actual detachment, is to perform one's duties. And by acting in the material situation, automatically the senses are gratified. There's no need to make any extra endeavor to gratify the senses. They're already gratified by engaging. So that was his position, is that he wasn't making any extra endeavor to try to enjoy more and more and more. He was doing his duty, and along with that came a lot of opulence, a lot of sense gratification, but at the same time, he was not attached. And so his mind and his heart were clear to remember and to love and feel that connection with God. So we're at that point, text 16. This is Priyavrata. Let's see who's. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsadevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsadevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsadevaya. So, I believe this is Lord Brahma, who is, yes, Lord Brahma is presenting the different reasons why Priyavrata should take up this path of material involvement. And so this is text 16. Even if one is liberated, he nevertheless accepts the body he has received according to his past karma. Without misconceptions, however, he regards his enjoyment and suffering due to that karma the way an awakened person regards a dream he had while sleeping. He thus remains steadfast and never works to achieve another material body under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Prabhupada's purport. The difference between a liberated and conditioned soul is that the conditioned soul is under the concept of bodily life, whereas a liberated person knows he is not the body, but a spirit, different from the body. Priyavrata might have thought that although a conditioned soul is forced to act according to the laws of nature, why should he, who is far advanced in spiritual understanding, accept the same kind of bondage and impediments to spiritual advancement? To answer this doubt, Lord Brahma informed him that even those who are liberated do not resent accepting in the present body the results of their past activities. While sleeping, one dreams many unreal things, but when he awakens, he disregards them and makes progress in factual life. Similarly, a liberated person, one who has completely understood that he is not this body, but a spirit, soul, disregards past activities performed in ignorance and performs his present activities in such a way that they produce no reactions. This is described in Bhagavad Gita. Yagnartat kamanonyatra lokoyam karmabandhana. If one performs activities for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality, the Yagna Purush, his work does not produce reactions, whereas karmis, who act for themselves, are bound by the reactions of their work. A liberated person, therefore, does not think about whatever he has ignorantly done in the past. Instead, he acts in such a way that he will not produce another body by fruit of activities, as clearly mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Mam chayo vyarcharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Regardless of what we have done in our past lives, if we engage ourselves in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord in this life, we will always be situated in Brahmabhuta, liberated state, free from reactions, and will not be obliged to take another material body. Chakva dehan punarjanma naitimam iti sorjuna. After giving up the body, one who has acted in that way does not accept another material body, but instead goes back home, back to Godhead. (17) Even if he goes from forest to forest, one who is not self-controlled must always fear material bondage because he's living with 6 co-wives: the mind and knowledge-acquiring senses. Even householder life however, cannot harm a self-satisfied learned man who has conquered his senses. So making the distinction here that someone who takes renounced life, which is compared to the person who just lives in the forest, but he's still identifying with the mind and the senses, he's still controlled by material bondage and fear. Whereas a person who's taken up family life and engaged in social interaction, if he's controlled his senses and he's always remembering Krishna, he's self-satisfied. He has nothing to fear from the material situation. Which is reminiscent of another way of talking about this found elsewhere in the scriptures, that if a person performs their material duties perfectly, they don't develop love for Krishna, Krishna consciousness, then they remain bound in the material energy. So whatever position of life one is in, remembering Krishna, becoming Krishna conscious, that's the essence. And that here, even someone takes externally renounced life, have no involvement, no family, no occupation, they live maybe even in a forest, or they wander like a mendicant. But if they haven't developed love for Krishna, then they're still bound. Purport, Srila Prabhupada. Narottam Das Thakur has sung, Grihe va vaneti take, iha garanga bala daki. Whether one is situated in the forest or at home, if he's engaged in the devotional service of Lord Chaitanya, he's a liberated person. Here, this is also repeated. For one who has not controlled his senses, going to the forest to become a so-called yogi is meaningless, because his uncontrolled mind and senses are going with him. He cannot achieve anything, even by giving up household life and staying in the forest. Formerly, many mercantile men from the upcountry of India used to go to Bengal, and thus there is a familiar saying, if you go to Bengal, your fortune will go with you. Our first concern, therefore, should be to control the senses. Since the senses cannot be controlled unless engaged in devotional service of the Lord, our most important duty is to engage the senses in devotional service. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. Bhakti means engagement of the purified senses in the service of the Lord. Herein, Lord Brahma indicates that instead of going to the forest with uncontrolled senses, it's better and more secure to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. Even household life can do no harm to a self-controlled person acting in this way. It cannot force him into material bondage. And Srila Rupa Goswami has further enunciated this position. Regardless of one's circumstances, if one fully engages his activities, mind, and words in the devotional service of the Lord, he should be understood to be a liberated person. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a responsible officer and a householder, yet his service to the cause of expanding the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is unique. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur says, The sense organs are certainly our greatest enemies. They're therefore compared to venomous serpents. However, if a venomous serpent is bereft of its poison fangs, it is no longer fearful. Similarly, if the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, there is no need to fear their activities. The devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement move within this material world, but because their senses are fully engaged in the service of the Lord, they're always aloof from material world. They are always living in a transcendental position. Text 18. One who is situated in household life and who systematically conquers his mind and 5 sense organs is like a king in his fortress who conquers his powerful enemies. After one has been trained in household life and his lusty desires have decreased, he can move anywhere without danger. The Vedic system of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams is very scientific, and its entire purpose is to enable one to control the senses. Before entering household life, grihastha ashram, a student is fully trained to become jitendriya, the conqueror of the senses. Such a mature student is allowed to become a householder, and because he was first trained in conquering his senses, he retires from household life and becomes vanaprast as soon as the strong waves of youthful life are past, and he reaches the verge of old age at 50 years or slightly more. Then, after being further trained, he accepts sannyas. He is then a fully learned and renounced person who can move anywhere and everywhere without fear of being captivated by material desires. The senses are considered very powerful enemies. As a king in a strong fortress can conquer powerful enemies, so a householder in grihastha ashram, household life, can conquer the lusty desires of youth and be very secure when he takes vanaprast and sannyas. Lord Brahma continued, My dear Priyavrata, seek shelter inside the opening in the lotus feet of the Lord, whose navel is also like a lotus. Thus, conquer the 6 sense organs, the mind and knowledge-acquiring senses. Accept material enjoyment because the Lord extraordinarily has ordered you to do this. You will thus always be liberated from material association, be able to carry out the Lord's orders in your constitutional position. There are 3 kinds of men within this material world. Those who are trying to enjoy the senses to the utmost are called karmis. Above them are the jnanis, who try to conquer the urges of the senses. And above them are the yogis, who have already conquered the senses. None of them, however, are situated in a transcendental position. Only devotees who belong to none of the above-mentioned groups are transcendental. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, Mam chayo vyavacharina, bhakti yogena sevate, sagunan samatityaitan, brahmabhuvaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Lord Brahma herein advises Priyavrata to remain transcendental in the fortress, not of family life, but of the lotus feet of the Lord. When a bumblebee enters the opening of a lotus flower and drinks its honey, it is fully protected by the petals of the lotus. The bee is undisturbed by sunshine and other external influences. Similarly, one who always seeks shelter at the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead is protected from all dangers. It is therefore said in Srimad Bhagavatam, For one who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, everything becomes easier. Indeed, even crossing the great ocean of nescience, Bhavam Buddhi, is exactly like crossing the hoofprint created by a calf. For such a devotee, there's no question of remaining in a place where every step is dangerous. Our actual duty is to carry out the supreme order of the personality of Godhead. If we are fixed in our determination to carry out the supreme order of the Lord, we are always secure, regardless of where we are situated, whether in hell or in heaven. Herein the words prakritim bhajasva, very significant. Prakritim refers to one's constitutional position. Every living entity has the constitutional position of being an eternal servant of God. Therefore, Lord Brahma advised Priyavrata, be situated in your original position as an eternal servant of the Lord. If you carry out his orders, you will never fall, even in the midst of material enjoyment. Material enjoyment achieved by dint of one's fruitive activities differs from material enjoyment given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A devotee sometimes appears to be in a very opulent position, but he accepts that position to follow the orders of the Personality of Godhead. Therefore, a devotee is never affected by material influences. The devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement are preaching all over the world in accordance with the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They have to meet many karmis, but by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they're unaffected by material influences. He has blessed them, as described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. A sincere devotee who engages in the service of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by preaching his cult all over the world will never be affected by Visaya Taranga material influences. On the contrary, in due course of time, he will return to the shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and will thus have perpetual association with him. Sri Sukadeva Goswami continued. After thus being fully instructed by Lord Brahma, who is the spiritual master of the three worlds, Priyavrata, his own position being inferior, offered obeisances, accepted the order, and carried it out with great respect. Sri Priyavrata was the grandson of Lord Brahma. Therefore, according to social etiquette, his position was inferior. It's the duty of the inferior to carry out the order of the superior with great respect. Priyavrata therefore immediately said, yes, sir, I shall carry out your order. Priyavrata is described as Maha-Bhagavata, a great devotee. The duty of a great devotee is to carry out the order of the spiritual master, or the spiritual master of the spiritual master in parampara system. As described in Bhagavad Gita, evam parampara praptam, one has to receive the instructions of the Supreme Lord through the disciplic chain of spiritual masters. The devotee of the Lord always considers himself a servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord. Lord Brahma was then worshipped by Manu, who respectfully satisfied him as he could. Priyavrata and Narada also looked upon Brahma with no tinges of resentment. Having engaged Priyavrata in accepting his father's request, Lord Brahma returned to his abode Satyaloka, which is indescribable by the endeavor of mundane mind or words. Manu was certainly very satisfied that Lord Brahma had persuaded his son Priyavrata to take the responsibility for ruling the world. Priyavrata and Narada were also very satisfied. Although Brahma had forced Priyavrata to accept the management of worldly affairs, thus breaking his vow to remain brahmachari and completely engage in devotional service, Narada and Priyavrata did not look upon Brahma with resentment. Narada was not at all sorry that he had been frustrated in making Priyavrata a disciple. Both Priyavrata and Narada were exalted personalities who knew how to respect Lord Brahma. Therefore, instead of looking upon Brahma with resentment, they very feelingly offered him their respect. Lord Brahma then returned to his celestial abode known as Satyaloka, which is described here as being impeccable and being unapproachable by words. It is stated in this verse that Lord Brahma returned to his residence, which is as important as his own personality. Lord Brahma is the creator of this universe and the most exalted personality within it. His lifetime is described in Bhagavad Gita. Sahasya Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Aharyad Brahmano Vidhu. The total duration of the 4 yugas is 4,300,000 years, and when it is multiplied 1,000 times, it equals 12 hours in the life of Brahma. Therefore, we cannot factually comprehend even 12 hours of Brahma's life, to say nothing of the 100 years that constitute his entire lifetime. How then can we understand his abode? The Vedic literatures describe that in such a yuga there is no birth, death, old age, or disease. In other words, Satyaloka is situated next to Brahmaloka, or the Brahmani effulgence. It is almost as good as Vaikuntha Loka. The Brahma's abode is practically indescribable from our present status. Therefore, it has been described as Avan Manasa Gochara, or beyond the description of our words and the imagination of our minds. The Vedic literatures thus describe the abode of Lord Brahma. In Satyaloka, where it is situated many millions and billions of years away, there's no lamentation, nor is there old age, disease, death, anxiety, or the influence of enemies. So we can stop here and something to reflect on. Hare Krishna. Glory to Prabhupada.